I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Cocktails up here feel just right. Is Cambria amazing? Alright. Bring a date, your team, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com. See you on the roof.
Hindus for Human Rights would not apologize for being Hindu. We are Hindu. And we are the kind of Hindu that stands up to say no to Hindutva, no to caste. The Hindutva brigade was strong and growing across the diaspora. So we had the fight, of course, for our communities and families in India, but also right here where we live. Our Hindus for Zoran group was given credit for neutralizing Hindutva in the public narrative around Zoran's campaign. Hindutva is playing such mischievous, harmful role in politics all across the country.
Hello from Vigilant. That's the signature podcast on Vigil, and Vigil stands for Voice of India, Global, Inclusive, Liberal. You know, it's a passionate thing with us at Vigil that the innate soul of India has always been liberal. Our laws are liberal, our education systems are liberal, the way we live our lives, our community interactions, everything has always been liberal. But unfortunately, over the last few years, what we've seen is a concerted attack, a concerted effort to silence these voices of liberalism, to frankly even scare them into submission. And at Vigil, we believe that we need a platform which amplifies these voices, which allows these voices to come out and reassert and re-emphasize the value system that we believe is innate to Indians and, of course, to Indian Americans. So that's Vigilant. Our guest today is Sunita Viswanath, and she's got a terrific body of work in activism, in women's rights, in human rights. I just will give you a very, very brief creds introduction of Sunita, and then we'll get right into the conversation, because through the conversation, her work will come through. Sunita spent very early years of her life in London and in Madras, which is now Chennai. After she turned 18,
Mother's Day has a way of sneaking up on you. But when it does, 1-800-Flowers makes it easy to send mom something beautiful, thoughtful, and worthy of everything she does. Right now, with double blooms from 1-800-Flowers, order 1 dozen roses and get another dozen for free. It's a bigger gesture with fresh, beautiful flowers arranged to make Mother's Day feel as special as she is. Make Mother's Day feel bigger with double blooms at 1-800-Flowers.com/Spotify. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/Spotify.
Went to Rutgers in the US. And then, of course, for the last 30 to 40 years, she's really been immersed in human rights organizations and women's rights. And she's founded a large number of organizations which are doing very seminal work. So we'll get to speak to Sunita about all of that very soon. Sunita, thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was reading the chat. Thank you so much, Raghav, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's such a pleasure. You know, we like to start, Sunita, in this podcast by trying to understand from the person themselves, from our guests themselves, the journey that they've had, particularly their early formative years, because we believe that, in a sense, defines the value system and the work we end up doing for the rest of our lives. Now, you have a very interesting young adulthood. I mean, your age 1 to age 5, you were in London. Then you came to Chennai and you stayed with your aunt for about 5 years. And then you went back to London and you were there until 18 years of age. So this very different social milieus and environment of a Madras stroke Chennai and a London. How did that confluence work for you as a child and then a young adult? And how did it influence you to become what you've become?
Well, I have to add the 0 to 1 in India. Means a lot to me that I was born there, and the earliest formative experiences were in India, in Delhi and Madras. So I guess when I think back, I'm going to be 58 in April. When I think back, I can now sort of connect the dots from all of the experiences and how they lead me to where I am today, as anyone probably can in their life. And those earliest experiences in India, I was a young child, a young girl living in an upper caste home, Telugu family, Andhra family in Madras, Chennai. And I was away from my parents. My parents were new immigrants in England and really struggling to manage. And it made it easy.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Easier for them to have me, their only child, with my aunt, who was the closest thing to my mom was her sister. If I had to be somewhere, that was the preferred place for me to be, so that I wasn't with strangers, baby minders, while they were, building a life. This is very strange for people to understand, that my mother and father would have made such a sacrifice, but it was an act of love. And, it really, I dwell on it because once a counselor, therapist said to me, I must be blocking some trauma for having been abandoned, but I realized this wasn't the right therapist for me, because it was nothing could be further from the truth. I was so spoiled in the most wonderful way. And, they never said no to anything. And I just had this beautiful, very rich life in those years in Madras. Very religious family, very ritualistic family. A lot of pujas, visits to temples, delicious food, music. It wasn't just seeing a picture of an elephant. Elephant would be going by in the street, and little me would go and put a little coin in the trunk of the elephant, and the elephant would bless me. These are, and then floods, Madras floods. Every time the roads would flood, we would not have to go to school, and we would play in that water. So I can never associate rain with sadness and depression. So I wouldn't have all of that if I hadn't grown up in India. But as I said, it was an upper caste family, and one of the most, poignant experiences for me that connects directly to what I do today is that it was a house that practiced and perpetrated casteism and untouchability. So, for instance, if I had a haircut, I would immediately have to come and bathe and shower. And of course, any of us who've ever had a haircut, you want to shower because of the bits of hair. I mean, it's very practical, but I know that, I understood that what I was being told is that somebody probably of a lower caste had touched me and I have to go and have a shower. That's one example. And the saddest example was the little girl, about my age, who would clean the toilet. And she would sort of cower and run to the bathroom. We only had one, and clean it, and then sort of cower and run out. And it wasn't just untouchability, it was unseeability. We weren't allowed to see her. And if we saw her, laid eyes on her, the understanding was that we would go shower. And even as a little child, I rejected that. I didn't believe that. I don't know that I had the words to say it, but I knew it was wrong. And so my earliest act of transgression was that I would go make sure nobody was looking, and I would put my feet in the wet footprints that she left. I would walk in them. And not only that, I remember thinking those perfect footprints were just like the footprints of Krishna or the Devi that we would paint in white paint on certain holidays, on holy days. And I made that connection. which both of those connections to me motivate everything I do today. To me, that notion that God is in everyone. If you're a Hindu, you are taught Aham Brahmasmi. God is literally in every single aspect of the universe, including that little girl. So the tiny me made that connection, and the tiny me protested. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I know that that holds true for me today.
Just a very interesting thought on this little girl who would come and clean the toilets. Did you ever think you would, share a doll with her, or you would reach out to her, maybe try and play with her, or was that completely taboo, and you as a child understood that there are these red lines that you're not allowed to cross?
I was, I'm sure I did play with kids that I wasn't allowed to. I'm sure I did all of that. That particular girl, she just sort of came and left. Okay. I think she would have been mortified if I had gone to play with her, because she was cowering as she ran in and ran out. But I know that the little girl I was would absolutely have played with her, and I wouldn't care, especially because I was away from my parents and nobody, I could do whatever. I really had a empowered sense of I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, it's interesting that as a 5-year-old or even less, you have that memory still seared in your
head. It really is. And then coming to England, I have so many memories of just racism. My mother would always, until I got married, my mother would always only wear saris. And she has an accent, a thick accent. She learned English properly only after going to England. And she worked the whole time she was there. So her English was good enough to do everything she had to do. But it had, it was her second language. So, or her third or fourth language, I should say. And so I remember people speaking very slowly to her, speaking differently to her, and feeling really upset about that. I remember my primary school when I came back to England. It was so scary. Girls escaped this, but there was such violence. So on any given day, many days, not every single day, there would be one Desi boy, what we called in England Paki. Paki was any Indian or Pakistani or Bangladeshi, South Asian boy. It was a boy would be chosen, and the message would come to him that he is the chosen one that day. So all day long, he knew that at the end of the day, he had to run for his life or he would be beaten.
He'd be beaten. Wow. Okay.
He'd be beaten. And this was in East London, in Stratford, London.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, that boy would we wouldn't talk about it. I remember it was sort of an unspoken rule that you wouldn't talk about this. You wouldn't, I mean, I probably wanted to go and speak to somebody about it, but it wasn't done. And that boy would just run for his life, and either he would make it to safety or he wouldn't. And then there would be a massive gang around him as a few boys beat him to a pulp. And the chant as they would be running for him would be, "We're going Paki bashing."
Wow.
And that happened in my childhood, and many incidents like this. But both of those, feel like very, very real, visceral experiences of injustice, violence, hatred. And the saving grace for me is that in both of those instances, I had something to balance it. So in my own family at home, while we were perpetrating caste and untouchability, I can tell you so many examples of how that same family, my aunt, my uncle, they were beautiful, generous people who, were many, many, many acts of love and generosity that transcended what was sort of necessary to do. And then in England too, I had so many English close friends. I actually, even at a young age, rejected the notion that I should just be friends with Indians. I always had a diverse group of friends. And it was really my saving grace that I saw it's also, and now I can tie this back into a sense of a Hindu tenet, that if God is in all of us, then there is no other. That really propels me. I don't see other in anyone.
But just one, I want to pick up on one sentence that you said, that you while you saw the casteist actions by people you loved very much, and the people who loved you very much, and you said they are very generous, they were very good people, they were extremely good people. That as someone who's growing up with this virtual dichotomy, right? Very good people doing some things that you as a thinking young person were virtually revolting against. What did that teach you, that this was actually not an act by an individual, this was a civilizational conditioning which was manifesting itself?
I was very young. I was too young to, think it through, but I knew that a person isn't either good or bad. My uncle, one of my dearest uncles, was nothing but good to me, probably the most unconditional love I received from him, but he was an abusive man to his wife. And that's so devastating for a little child to see the person you look up to so much fall in your eyes. But I can't just write somebody off because of those kinds of experiences. And then our religion also teaches us that we, and I think every religion teaches us this, but especially Hinduism, that the divine battle, for instance, in the Mahabharata, but any battle, is one that isn't happening on a battlefield, it's happening inside us. Right. We have equal potential for good and bad within us, every single one of us. And we need to operate from that humility of acknowledging that when we look at somebody else. If somebody is, contradicting, your values or their own values, you look in the mirror, you're probably doing that yourself.
Yeah, I mean, Kabir said it so well, right? Bura jo dekhan main chala. So, I mean, that's it's iconic that
yes.
that. Let's get you to America, because now that's a very different country when you go to America, or I assume that it must have been very different from both Madras and England. And then you are a young graduate student in a university.
Undergrad.
Undergrad, yeah. So you went for your undergrad there. And you obviously had experiences, you had interactions, which again were different and yet similar, and would have again advanced you as your value system as the person you were. Can you share some of those with us? Because America is such a big change when you go there for the first time.
Yes. So I mean, I've lived in America since 1988, and so it's been a long time, and this is home now. I think what I remember when I first arrived here, it's so interesting. America is a country which has in its history slavery, the decimation of the Native American population, racism that goes on till today. And today we're in this completely crazy existential moment of attacks on immigrants. So, there is this very dark thread that propels American history. When I arrived from England, I felt my guard go down, because in England, the person in the crosshairs of the worst white racist person was somebody who looks like me. Whereas when I arrived in America, it was clear that, I couldn't feel that kind of extreme visceral racism towards me. And so in a very human, immediate sense, I relaxed here. And many people, even immigrants who come to this country from wherever they come, they do talk about, a sort of possibility of something different. There is something freeing in this country. I say that fully acknowledging that not for everyone. This country has its hated people. But James Baldwin said, and I'm only paraphrasing it, I can't quote it, but, the blacks and the whites of this country are both the sons and daughters of this country. It's just that the black folk are the most reviled and hated ones.
And I remember reading when we were doing some research on you, that you have often said that there is almost a debt of gratitude that Indian Americans need to owe to the African Americans, because it was their struggle which, in a sense, empowered the Indian American community as a minority, which never had to face that kind of ostracism.
Absolutely. I'm just returning from Selma and Montgomery, Alabama. Every year they have an annual Jubilee, they call it. It's a commemoration of Bloody Sunday in March 1965, when brave Alabamans, African Americans, marched across what is called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It's a small, little, iconic now bridge for their voting rights. Because in 1965, African Americans didn't have their voting rights. And there were 3 times that the community marched across the bridge. The first time, the smaller group, locals, were met with police batons, water cannons, horseback troopers with guns, and people fled, that bridge, blood dripping. And the people who were on that bridge that day, March 7th, 1965, those of them who are still alive, they're called foot soldiers, and they are honored on this anniversary. And I've been there 4 times now.
Wow.
And I just came back from there. Then there were 2 other marches. You can read about it. Martin Luther King, after the first Bloody Sunday, he came to Selma. And then there was the first attempt to march across, which he turned back. And then there was the second one where they successfully went across and marched all the way to Montgomery. And then shortly afterwards, the Voting Rights Act was passed. So that tells you that, the fact that we can be citizens and vote, that came from those days in 1965. So absolutely, we have that of gratitude. And when Hindus for Human Rights, my organization, was started, we started it with that commitment expressly to sort of lift up those connections, and in everything that we do, connect it back to that history. We connect even further because, of course, we know that the nonviolent civil resistance of the civil rights movement in this country was in part influenced by the nonviolent resistance that was part of the freedom struggle in India.
Right.
So we connect it back there, and then we connect, and I was just there where many were doing this. The fight for immigrant rights right now in Trump's America is the fight of anyone who cares about civil rights and human rights in America. So many people who came to Selma this year said to the folks who gathered to honor the civil rights history, to say that, what's happening in Minneapolis, what's happening in Seattle, in LA, in New York even, the ICE raids on immigrant communities is the fight of we should march across the bridge this year for immigrant rights in this country. And so we are very, very committed to making these connections. We make another connection too, which this country, many spaces for democratic rights fail to connect domestic civil rights and democratic rights to global issues. This country, when you go to vote in this country, lives around the world hang in the balance. When I used to work in Afghanistan, so many Afghans said to me, half jokingly, we should be able to vote in your elections because our fate depends on what happens there. And it's such a truism. And certainly, we look at what's happening, the situation in Gaza, Palestine, and now the war in Iran. Lives are being lost because of our decisions here in America. And Martin Luther King, when he was alive, a year actually to the day before he died, he was in New York City, my city, in Riverside Church, and he gave a searing speech called Beyond Vietnam. And the major press and the major African American organizations, including the NAACP, pilloried him for diluting the civil rights message and talking about foreign affairs. But he refused to sever rights here from rights there and the complicity of America around the world. And so I believe that if he were alive today, he would be speaking from the mountaintop about Palestine and Iran and India even.
Yes, that's true. We will come and speak a lot about the work that you do with Hindus for Human Rights. I just want to pick up on the Afghanistan point, because literally the first institutional action that you yourself founded was for Afghan women in 2001. And clearly that was 9/11 and then the war in Afghanistan. And then 10 years from there, you transited or evolved into the Hindu organization that you set up. I want to understand that 10-year journey, where it started in Afghanistan, why it started, and how you transited on to making a movement for Hindu human rights.
Yes. Like so many progressive people who happen to be born into Hindu families, I didn't wear my Hindu identity on my sleeve. I felt uncomfortable doing it. It felt like it was a subconscious act. It probably was just more convenient to show up as a human being that cared about human rights. But the fact is, if I admitted it, that saying I was Hindu made me uncomfortable because of, at that time, being a majority community within my own South Asian community and caste. I would have to sort of, reckon with the atrocity of caste. And it was, much more, I was a Hindu. I never said I wasn't. I went to temple. I had kids very early. On their birthdays, we would go to the temple. My parents are very religious. It wasn't that I was distancing from my religion. I just felt that my religion was a private affair, and showing up in the public space to do my activism, I didn't need to connect it back to my religion. And so then when the reason that I co-founded Women for Afghan Women was before 9/11, actually, Women for Afghan Women.
It was before 9/11. Okay.
I was working in a foundation that funded women's activism, mostly in New York, but also outside. So I had access to money. I didn't make the decisions, but I had a strong voice in my foundation as one who recommended grants. And so given that in Afghanistan, the Taliban had taken over and we were seeing news of public executions of women, and women aren't allowed to laugh or sing or, walk in public. It was all very...
Go to school. They were not allowed to.
Absolutely. So given all of that, I was very, very concerned about it. And I was working in a women's foundation that, purported to care about women around the world. And I live in New York, where everybody's in New York. There's a little pocket from every community here in my city. So I went out to look for a group of Afghan women who are concerned about human rights in their country and grassroots work for the Afghan community in New York. And I searched for that group so that we could fund them. But the search for that group revealed that there really wasn't such an organization. And the people that I was meeting started meeting regularly in my conference room at my foundation. And at some point, about 6 months before 9/11, that group decided that we should be that organization. There's a lot for us to do. And so we were founded. We called ourselves Women for Afghan Women. And there were two main focuses. The one was to advocate for human rights in Afghanistan and to learn for other countries that might have gone through a similar journey of needing to address Muslim extremism and women's rights. So that obviously was the need of the hour. But what I brought was the other pillar of that work, which is a dedication to grassroots. I said, we're in New York, we're not in Afghanistan. There is an Afghan community. And by then, we knew that women's rights were being denied in that community here. We even knew of
New York. Okay.
In New York. We even knew of girls who were not allowed to go to school in New York after they got their period. And girls, once they reached a certain age, they were taken to Pakistan for a marriage that was, ostensibly free, but probably forced. So we were hearing all these stories. So I didn't want to do work for Afghanistan without grounding ourselves in the community here. So those were the two very grassroots work, at one end, and bold advocacy on the global stage rooted in those local stories. And that was the framework of the organization. And until today, I mean, I'm not in that organization anymore, but that's still the framework for the organization. And that's really the framework of everything that I do. I'm devoted to every Hindus for Human Rights chapter works very locally, building local power to address and resist local injustices. And when you piece all of that together, you get, that's our passport to speak about our issues, the fact that we're privy to local experience.
So in 2011, you set up Sadhana. And now this is totally focused on the Hindu American community.
Yes, it was called Sadhana Coalition of Progressive Hindus.
A coalition of progressive Hindus. And a very, very strong, almost umbilical link to the Hindu religion in terms of the advocacy. So take us through that transition where you now are willing to step out and address Hinduism, which, as you said, was something you treated as a very private affair. You saw its greatness, you saw its cruelty, but you treated that as a private affair. But now you're willing to come out as an activist and address those cruelties.
It was the autumn of 2011, fall of 2011, and that Sadhana was created. And the real impetus was the inspiration that I received from the years of working with my Afghan brothers and sisters, especially the ones in Afghanistan. About 50% of our staff, Women for Afghan Women, grew to be the largest women's rights organization serving Afghan women in the world over the years by 2011. And I would go regularly and speak to the men and the women. It was 50% of the staff were men. And I was especially curious to know what motivates them to work for this organization, because it was dangerous work. You could get killed for, championing the cause of a little girl who had been sold by her father or raped by her husband, or, whatever was going on in that girl or woman's life, was very, very dangerous work. And the staff, every day, they didn't know if they would go home. If there were constant threats on the life of the people who worked
from the community itself. The community itself.
From the community, from the families of the women that we were helping, from members of the parliament, from many sources. And there was one member of parliament who divulged one of the addresses of the shelters where we were sheltering women. He went on primetime TV and said that we're operating a brothel and here's the address. It was terrifying. So these things were happening regularly. And when I would ask, why do you do this work? You could get other jobs. There are plenty of jobs. Sadly, we're in a completely different place in Afghanistan right now, which is heartbreaking. But during those years, it was a country that was getting up off its feet. There were plenty of, just many things were happening. We could go to court, and we had staff attorneys that would fight the cases of the women and girls we were supporting. None of that is possible anymore. So I would ask, and the answer from the men and the women would invariably be, it is our duty as Muslims. I would hear that over and over again. What kind of a Muslim would I be if I didn't do this? And all the women...
These are native Afghans? Native Afghans?
Yes. My commitment to grassroots led us to only hire locally. Every province that we worked in, we hired locally. We didn't even move. We very rarely moved people from province to province. It was a very grassroots commitment. And the organization, sure, we fundraised in America, but it was registered as an Afghan organization and operated with the blessing and the legal registration of the government of Afghanistan. And it operated within an Islamic framework. So imams would cut the ribbons when we opened a facility. Everybody under our care had Quranic classes. I mean, that local commitment was paramount. And honestly, it was the right thing, but it was also the only way we could do the work. There's no
Right.
way even women would come to us for help if we didn't operate that
If you
way.
didn't.
And I understand that. So hearing again and again and again this expression of religious obligation to be brave and put aside oneself for something larger, it was such a, I mean, I spoke earlier about a mirror, putting a mirror to yourself. This put
Yes.
a mirror to me. If this is the kind of Muslim I am working with, who am I? What kind of Hindu am I? Am I a Hindu? If I'm not a Hindu, perhaps I should say so and say I'm not a Hindu. But if I am a Hindu, what kind of a Hindu am I? And it all came to a head for me. I'm sure that people close to me were sick of me saying, oh, I feel this rightward shift in the Hindu community. Hindutva is growing. People in my family are saying really horrendously blatant Islamophobic things. I don't like this. Why isn't there a Hindu response to this? Why, when I go out into the street, into interfaith vigils, like your name, and other actions, there would be, people from every religion, except I would never see Hindus there fighting for women's rights or environmental justice or fighting poverty and hunger. There would never be a Hindu. And there's a temple here in New York that's led by a woman. And in those early years when we're talking in the, early 2000s, I asked her, would she come to a faith and feminism conference? And she said, I'll come to a faith conference, but you have to drop the word feminism. And it was so crushing. It's like, why? Our religion, at least in its tenets, of course, we don't treat women well. But, if you just think of what the religion teaches you, God has no gender. It's like radical in the rights it gives us. And so
Exactly.
it was very crushing. So what happened that day in the fall of 2011 is that I was in yet another one of those interfaith vigils. It was in Occupy Wall Street, the protest that was happening here in downtown Manhattan. And everybody was there except a Hindu. And I had sort of had enough. And I went up there and I just said, I'm a Hindu and I support Occupy Wall Street. And it was my sort of coming out as a Hindu. And another thing happened right around the same time, which is that there was a group of people that were trying to build what was called, it was a misnomer, it was called the Ground Zero Mosque. It was a mosque. It was not a mosque, actually. It was an interfaith harmony peace center close to Ground Zero, a decade after 9/11. And the far right of Christians and Jews came together to really say, this is an abomination. You cannot have what they called Ground Zero Mosque close to Ground Zero. It's a travesty to the lives lost on 9/11. And I went with a group of Afghan women to support the effort. And I was standing there and I was with a group of Afghan women in service, not as a leader, for them to stand witness and support this, it was called Park 51 effort. And I was standing there and suddenly I heard on a megaphone a Hindu prayer, a Shanti mantra. And I couldn't believe it. It's the closest thing I've ever had to a spiritual experience of that kind of, I felt like something was, something beautiful was happening in the heavens or something. I couldn't believe it. And I looked up and I can't tell you how devastating it was. It was a man in saffron across the police line standing with the Christian supremacists and the Zionists. He was on that side, and his Shanti mantra was in support of their Islamophobia and hate. And that day, I said, what is the use of me being here, a Hindu here? Clearly, this complete travesty of Hinduism, this is not what I believe to be Hinduism, is what is the public voice of Hinduism. There's no use me being here without speaking, and I will never, ever again allow hate to be spoken in the name of Hinduism without speaking up. And that was really the day that this journey began.
That was the moment you stepped out, literally stepped out. And now I'm curious, of course, there were lots of initiatives you would have done, But I'm curious that you, from sadhana, you come to Hindus for Human Right, and you do it in 2019. You set up the organization in 2019. Now, I may be making a juxtaposition, but it's not a wild one, because in 2019, we have Modi 1.0 at his peak in India. We have Trump 1.0 really, rolling forward with his first term. Both these politicians, these overwhelming politicians, consummate politicians, both of them have literally yanked the political gravity of their country towards conservatism. Both of them are politicians who indulge in visible bonhomie. It's literally like they are pals. So there is a lot of this happening in both America and in India, and there is a discernible shift towards conservatism. Was that in any way responsible for HHR, Hindus for Human Rights?
Directly.
Okay.
Absolutely. So the years from 2011 to 2019, I was doing my work through sadhana. And again, as I keep saying, my commitment is local work. So most of the work of sadhana was happening in New York, just getting young people especially and temple leaders to connect with social justice issues, doing a beach cleanup at a beach where Hindus are worshipping and putting their puja materials into the bay, bringing volunteers from temples to clean that up, to see, what the effect of their prayer is. We called it the Ganga of New York City. And then connecting families who are having either same-sex or interfaith marriages with progressive priests and priestesses who would conduct those marriages. Or, and I very sadly lost my father just a couple of weeks ago. And so you want a priest or a priestess that will allow a daughter to perform rites and not discriminate against women in that way. And so we slowly but surely built, it's still small, but a group of progressive priests and priestesses who do not see anything wrong with being inclusive in the way that they perform rituals and pujas and ceremonies. These were the kinds of things and other things. We ran a Baal Vihar for children of a progressive, inclusive, diverse Hindu teaching, because the Baal Vihars that we could find were quite, if not conservative, rigid. And we wanted a place where our kids could come and ask questions, and the questions would be welcomed. We think that's even a part of Hinduism. The Rig Veda says, let noble thoughts come from all directions. And so many of the texts in Hinduism are question and answer. I mean, why do we lose that part of our tradition? So we were doing this kind of work. Now, I was, of course, very increasingly alarmed by everything that was happening in India during the first term of Modi. And when Modi won his second term with an even larger mandate, I felt it was urgent to have another platform. Sadhana was doing very gentle, beautiful, deep work that we shouldn't trouble with the kind of strident political advocacy that I felt was necessary. And if you look at the Jewish community, it has so many organizations in America that run, a whole spectrum of needs being addressed and political perspectives and inclinations. So it didn't seem crazy that a huge community like the Hindu American community could support yet another organization. So with a group of people, especially my closest colleague in Hindus for Human Rights, Raghav Bahl, who has done so much work in India too, we started Hindus for Human Rights quickly. As soon as Modi's second election happened, we talked about the need for a more strident platform. The other thing is, sadhana was a place for young people especially to come and ask those questions that I myself had at the beginning of this journey. What kind of a Hindu am I? What is a Hinduism without caste? What does that look like? we felt that those questions are so important, and we need safe spaces for that kind of existential exploration and theological exploration. But the house was on fire. So Hindus for Human Rights was an organization that would not apologize for being Hindu. We are Hindu, and we are the kind of Hindu that stands up to say no to Hindutva, no to caste. We will put our bodies on the line, and we will join others, whoever there is that is fighting this careening to the far right. We are there. And so that was the energy with which and also the first term of Modi, we saw hundreds and hundreds of lynchings, and CAA was passed, and we just didn't know what was to come next. We needed to grow ourselves to be strong to fight. And of course, by then we knew that the Hindutva brigade was strong and growing across the diaspora. So we had the fight, of course, for our communities and families in India, but also right here where we live. And that's why we started Hindus for Human Rights. And the reason we started it in a hurry was because Howdy Modi was coming, and we wanted to have a name and a placard ready in time. So I was there at Howdy Modi outside. They didn't tell you much about the protest. There was a massive protest outside.
There was?
Massive. It was mostly Muslims. I don't know of other Hindus who were there, but I was there, and I had my sign, and the sign said, "Real Hindus don't lynch." And I stood there with a brand new Hindus for Human Rights, and I watched 52,000 people, stream into that stadium. And I was devastated and sad that so many people who looked like me, who could be my family, were going in there. We learned from the protest that Trump was in there. And afterwards, we saw the images and everything. But I was also, and I said this to some journalist who was there that day, I said, I was so grateful that somehow I will be able to look at my children and future grandchildren, I have one now, in the eye to say, I wasn't part of those 52,000. I was out here saying no to this kind of hate. And all of us need to ask ourselves, what are we doing so that we can look future generations in the eye? When somebody says, where were you that day?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You just for your own self-respect, you need to have an answer for yourself that I wasn't a part of it. No, I wasn't. I was standing apart. I see now that you are going in for a 501c4 filing, and that gives you, that makes the platform one for direct political action, direct political advocacy. What's this transition going to be? What is the intention? What's the end game here?
It's a moment of exciting transition in Hindus for Human Rights, where 6 years old, we've really matured. We have a track record that we're very proud of. And there's a lot we need to do. And we find that different people in our base, we're building chapters all around the country, are interested in different aspects of our work. And the folks who are interested in political advocacy maybe aren't that interested in the work we are doing to network and build a theological response to Hindutva and hate and caste. And so we are organizing ourselves in different pillars or buckets of work. So one is Hindus for Human Rights, what we are, which is a 501c3 organization, which is the most common nonprofit designation. We will continue base building, cultural work, work to educate the community and mobilize the community for inclusive, pluralistic values, liberal values, if you like. But we are also out of that work of 6 years of building Hindus for Human Rights. We are birthing 2 new avatars of ourselves, and I'm so excited. One is what you mentioned, the 501c4, which is the nonprofit designation that is allowed to do electioneering, that's allowed to speak up when a particular candidate doesn't represent our values. We don't want people to vote for them. They're taking money from Hindutva actors. They are supporting harmful Islamophobic legislation. We as a 501c3 cannot do much to advocate in those situations. So Hindus for Human Rights Action That's the name of our 501c4. It is being launched tonight at a beautiful event in New York City.
Yes.
And we are unleashing the political voice of progressive Hindus. And it, the most recent example that validates this effort is again, this is a wonderful city that I live in. It's the city that elected a brand new mayor, Zoran Mamdani. And we did not have our Hindus for Human Rights Action up and running in time to get into that fight. And because of that, I created with a couple of others just a WhatsApp group. It was just a WhatsApp group that was called Hindus for Zoran. And it grew from 3 to about 150 by the end. Wonderful people who wanted this exciting young candidate who represented all of us and our inclusive values to win. That was our single goal. And I've never done more joyous work. We showed up to every rally with our sign. If we were a small group or a big group, our sign was there, big banner, Hindus for Zoran. And we took Zoran Mamdani to temples. We took him to temples. We put out our beautiful messaging, our press bites into WhatsApp groups where, all of us were Hindu, and our family and community WhatsApp groups were exploding with hate towards Zoran Mamdani. And I know from speaking to people on the campaign that there were so many threats, violent threats, death threats, and the communities that were sending the most of those were extremist Jews and extremist Hindus. And so we were told by people on the staff committee, that our affinity group, even though we were small and didn't have money, we were doing really critical work. And a journalist, in one of the Indian presses, actually, some journalist said that gave us credit. Our Hindus for Zoran group was given credit for neutralizing Hindutva in the public narrative around Zoran's campaign. And we also did a beautiful Garba event during Navratri, a public Garba event by Hindus for Zoran. People just who were walking by came and danced with us. Literature. So this is it. This is what we could do as a group of individuals, but we cannot make a small WhatsApp group every time there's a candidate. Hindutva is playing such mischievous, harmful role in politics all across the country. So this is a great validation for this purpose of creating Hindus for Human Rights Action. We've already endorsed a number of candidates who have inclusive values, who stand against the multiracial, multi-faith far right that has this country's democracy by the throat. There was about an 8% increase in votes for Trump in our community, in the Indian community and the Hindu community. So we have to take on responsibility for where we are now. So we need to work as Hindus, progressive Hindus, in our community and in the broader community to say our political work has to be inclusive. We have a responsibility to defend this democracy. I can't believe I'm saying this. I was always concerned about India's democracy. And now the fight has extended here because it's the Voting Rights Act that was won in 1965 is now today on the chopping block.
Yeah. Wow. Can you imagine? I, pick up on that 8% percentage point number that you just said. So there is a thought, and it'd be great to get your perspective on it. It's a thought that this whole Hindutva or conservative ultra-right sentiment within the Indian American diaspora, it peaked around November 2024, the election of Trump 2.0. But then subsequently, in the next 12 to 15 months, because of the actions of the administration, whether it's H-1B visas, foreign students, immigration action, ICE, that there seems to be a shift away. Is that a hope, or is that a phenomenon that's happening on the ground?
Well, there's two things to think about. One is it's not possible to deny that Hindutva in this country is extremely strong and funded powerful, and all the efforts that we go to fight it are Sisyphean because of just how powerful they are. It's at an extreme where the Sikh community in the diaspora is terrified because, the proponents of the Hindutva government in India is literally assassinating them. So we cannot in any way sort of, minimize the dangers of Hindutva and its power and its influence right here. I cannot walk into a Hindu temple without feeling, the suffocation that comes from the people who have power in especially the Indian temples, I should say. This is not true of non-Indian temples, of, Hindutva ideology or fear. It's not that everybody supports Hindutva ideology. It's that there's a real palpable fear to say anything about it. So that I don't want to in any way minimize that. But on the other hand, whether it's Carnegie Endowment or Pew, there are a number of studies that have come out where there are surveys of the Indian community broadly and Hindus within that give clear statistics that show that the vast majority of Indian and Hindu Americans do not support caste and do support the anti-caste bills that are floated in various parts of the country. They do not agree that it is anti-Hindu to fight caste, which is what the Hindutva organizations will tell you. So it's very encouraging that these surveys give you such a majority. 77% of Hindus, according to Carnegie Endowment, consider Hindutva ideology very harmful in the Indian context, which is, you wouldn't, those stats give me an immense amount of assurance as we go about doing our work. That on the one hand, it's perhaps fear and a victimization by propaganda, fake news, that make people, and confusion, honestly. You're hearing so many different conflicting pieces of information and you sort of don't know. And everyone is working hard to eke out a living and, deal with whatever's happening at home. And so to even parse out what is true, what is false, people don't have time and they trust their leaders and the leaders are not trustworthy. So it's those kinds of reasons why there isn't a bigger resistance. And but the encouragement that comes from these kinds of statistics and when we have conversations on the ground with people give us so much encouragement and momentum, and the people who support us. We need people in the Indian community, in the Hindu community, in the non-Hindu Indian community, and outside. Anybody who cares about pluralistic values needs to support an organization like us because we are pretty much alone doing this fight. In the diaspora and even in India, there's no mobilization of Hindus to fight the growing tide of Hindutva. So it is really important for folks to understand. People who are fighting for democratic values, civil rights in America need to know that there were Hindutva proponents who were part of the January 6th. They were, the insurrection in DC on Capitol Hill. There were Hindutva proponents there with their Indian flag. That is not what the Indian flag represents, and we should all be appalled by that. And then white Christian supremacist Steve Bannon, he is an honorary chair of the Hindu Republican Council. Why do you think that is? It is a complete lockstep of the far right of all the various communities and religious communities. We have to hold hands. The only way to fight this kind of diverse, multiracial, multi-faith fascism is to refuse to let go of each other. And that's what we advocate. We do nothing without holding hands with our Dalit and Muslim, especially also Christian and Sikh siblings. And can I tell you, I told you that one avatar, which is so urgent, and in fact, we should have already had it a long time ago, is Hindus for Human Rights Action, which is being launched tonight. The other one, which is what in this time of transition, it is where I personally will be giving my time and my efforts. It's a new initiative called Samadarshini. Darshini comes from a line in the Gita, And it's about Lord Krishna telling Prince Arjuna that one must look with equal vision at everyone. And it's a religious mandate to that pluralistic vision of Aham Brahmasmi, God is in everyone. And so that's how we have named our project. Back in December 2021, when hundreds of Hindu religious leaders gathered in Haridwar to express hate and call for a genocide against Muslims, we were horror struck. And that started us on a journey that we call Prema Yatra. We already, through sadhana, had a number of progressive religious leaders, Hindu priests and priestesses here in the States who were aligned with us. We wanted to find such religious leaders in India. Swami Agnivesh was already no more. He was very close to us. And sadly, he was no more. And so we nobody had stepped into his shoes. He often didn't wear shoes, but Swamiji, he didn't build up, people to carry his mantle. So we went on a journey. We've been on several. We call them Prema Yatra, where we are traveling across India, looking for progressive, inclusive, anti-caste, anti-Hindutva, love-rooted Hindu swamis, sadhvis, priests, pujaris, acharyas, and the number is growing, and they themselves are organizing separate from us. Some of those religious leaders have started an organization called Satya Dharam Samvad, which is growing in India. It's so beautiful, the work they are doing, deep grassroots work to influence the young, especially with loving values. So Samadarshini, our project, will build that work to
in India,
in the world.
In the world, okay.
Global. So we being a US organization, we locate ourselves here, but the influences can come from Hindus. We're a global community. Right. There's temples everywhere. So we will find Hindu religious leaders that align with us to feed into the creation of a Hindu theology, which is modern for our times in today's reality, which stands resolutely against caste in all forms and every form of hate and discrimination. And it's not my work. I'm not a Hindu religious leader, but I will help hold the container for...
You will be the catalyst for that. You'll be the catalyst.
Together. And I'm so excited to do this work. I've been talking about public theology. The question of, if I am a Hindu, what kind of Hindu am I? I'm going to be 58. It's what I am going to do for the rest of my life. My Hinduism doesn't need a temple. My temple is where there is suffering, where there is discrimination, where there is war, where there is conflict. That's where I want to take my prayers, and my journeys to those places will be my pilgrimages. And temples that I'm not going to be dogmatic. I will walk into any temple, but my temples of choice will be the ones where the priest does not have to be a Brahmin male, where it doesn't have a sign that says only Hindus beyond this point. I will prioritize those temples and bring attention to them. And I have taken my prayers, my fierce prayers, to the West Bank, to the southern tip of Gaza, to Minneapolis a couple of months ago when it was at the height of ICE occupation. And just a couple of days ago, my prayers were taken to Selma, to that holy ground where blood was spilt in order for me to have my voting rights.
This is so invigorating to listen to, because the statement that you made, it strikes you as what a vacuum exists, actually, because there is no counter mobilization of Hindus. There is a counter political mobilization or even a sociological mobilization, but it's not led or significantly contributed to by the Hindus. As you said, it's Christian, Sikh, Dalits are Hindus, but it's a victimized sect within the Hindus. So this effort that you're making to do this mobilization of thought, of action, the yatras, the Samdarshini action, this is much needed, because this 77% that the Carnegie Endowment survey shows, I can tell you at an instinctive level that it is in that category. It is in that 60 to 75% category of the fact that the enlightened Hindu does not support the bigoted Hindu.
Yes.
But it's the decibel level. It's the decibel level which makes it 77 appear 77-23 the other way. It is actually 77-23.
It's absolutely true. Anytime we lost in California, we won in Seattle, these anti-caste bills. Anytime one of these anti-caste bills is introduced, the largest, best funded Hindutva organizations in this country immediately put in their opposition and say, this is anti-Hindu, this will lead to victimization of Hindus, discrimination against Hindus, bullying of Hindu kids. We are the only organization that will say no. We fighting against caste is the first order of business for any progressive, inclusive-minded Hindu. It's the first thing without doing that, you cannot call yourself a progressive Hindu. We absolutely, and plus, as Hindus, we have not just the right, but the moral and religious obligation to question everything and to denounce anything happening in front of you that is unjust. My guru, who is a professor from Trinidad who lives in America, Professor Anantanand Rambachan, he teaches me that if you have a text from any religion, especially our religion, that tells you one thing, but your experience, what you see with your own eyes and feel with your own body tells you different, your duty is to your own experience, to your own rationality. That is our religion. That's why the Rig Veda says, let noble thoughts come from all directions. The truth is one.
This is so wonderful to hear. And I am so excited for you that you are embarking on the next chapter of what has been a truly gritty and dedicated journey that you've had over the last so many decades. And now you are embarking on, as you said, the strident part and then the Samdarshini part. So you are really going the two different energies.
And your name, both you were talking about vigilant and vigil. And I was thinking that really, that sort of summarizes the two energies, which are both so connected and both essential. The fierce fight and the deep quest for truth.
The introspection and the quest for truth. So beautifully put. I wish you so well, Sunita Viswanath, in the two new initiatives that you are launching, coming on top of the decades of work that you've done, fearlessly, honestly, with great dedication. I am sure you will meet with success, and your success, frankly, will be the success of every right-thinking, progressive Hindu in the whole world. So more power to you. Really, we are all with you in as much as we can be with you, contribute, support you, empower you. So all power to you. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for hearing my story.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.